I finished the whole Red Queen series, and I just wanted to give a brief review of the series as a whole without spoilers, because in my single book videos, I've given quite a few spoilers. So for all of you who have an interest in reading the series, but you just need like a little nudge or something, but you also don't want all the spoilers, this video is for you. And I'm not going to hold up the whole stack this whole time. So here we go. We'll just talk about Red Queen. First of all, this is a dystopian fantasy, which I had to look up and see if there was actually a term or like a genre for that, because it definitely took me the first book and a half for it to really click that this is not just a fantasy series. I guess I just went into the assumption that it's just purely fantasy, and very quickly, this is not a spoiler. Anything I say will be from like the beginning of this one, basically. I'm gonna try not to spoil anything at all. But very quickly, you do know, like within the first chapter or two, that there's technology in this world. There's electricity, there's phones and things. Not phones. Nobody has phones, which is really weird. But they have like walkie-talkies and cameras and things. So there is electricity, but I still just kind of assumed that it was like a strange twist on a fantasy world. And not strange as in bad, but just I have not seen that. I've never read another dystopian fantasy before. So it just kind of like went over my head that they were not way in the past or in a completely different world or something. And there's a map in this one, but I never looked at it. So it wasn't until the map in Glass Sword, which let me find that. Just kidding, there's not a map in Glass Sword, but there is one in King's Cage. So I looked at this map in King's Cage, and it just kind of hit me that they're in the United States, which is just so interesting to me. And things started feeling different and hitting different because Norda is like more where I live. So I was like, oh cool, okay, I know what their weather is like and that sort of thing. And then I've been to the Great Lakes and I've lived in Illinois. So I don't know, it was just interesting. I've also lived in the South before, and so I started being like, okay, the different kingdoms, I can relate to them more because I know where they are and I've actually been to those places. So it was very cool. So I started saying in my videos and like to friends and things that this is dystopian masquerading as fantasy, or it's futuristic masquerading as fantasy. And there are also some like hints to the history of the world that make me feel like that it is just our world in the future, which is so interesting to me. It's not like a parallel universe or a different universe or completely different from our world. It seems like this is our world, but later. Anyway, so I started saying things like that, like this is fantasy, or like this is dystopian masquerading as fantasy. And I finally yesterday looked that up, and I just looked up, is Red Queen fantasy? And the first thing on Google said, it's dystopian fantasy. And I was like, okay, so there is a genre, there is a term for that. I wasn't wrong, but also this is not something new that I just figured out. So just know that going in, it's not like high fantasy Lord of the Rings or something. It's dystopian fantasy, which again is so cool, and I love that. Again, I've never read anything like that before, so I had a really fun time once I kind of started thinking about it that way. I really loved it. Let me just outline some of my favorite things from the series. I really love the characters. I am such a character reader, and I felt like the characters were well done. They all had their own wants and their own things that they needed to learn and their own motivations. And so I felt like the characters were well done, because it wasn't just, here's your main character who's important, nobody else matters. Everybody had something they were working towards and something from their past that was influencing how they acted now. And I just thought that they were well-rounded and that every character mattered. The character relationships were also very interesting to me because some of them did not turn out the way I thought that they would. And then there are other ones that we don't get told specifically that they get together or that this thing happens, but it's kind of hinted at that like in the future maybe. And I just really loved the character relationships and interactions. I thought that those were done super well. I also really loved the politics. So we have like 4 or 5 different kingdoms, and the main focus is Norda, but there are other kingdoms that get talked about, and they have different governments. So there are a couple that are monarchies. There's one that's more of a democracy or a republic. There's one that's like more of an aristocracy, I think. Kind of. Don't quote me on that, but that's kind of what it sounds like more to me. And then there's one that's a little bit more of like, not quite anarchy, because it's not like, you know, chaos everywhere, but they don't really have much of a ruler. So just interesting, the different kingdoms and their different governments, and then how they interact with each other. And when you get into the politics of like, okay, these kingdoms are allied right now because they can both give each other something. But this kingdom over here is maybe going to steal this one to be its ally because they can offer something else, or because there's so much strife between these two kingdoms, their alliance is very frail. And it's just very interesting. I really loved the politics, and I loved all of their war meetings and like the sit downs. That's not something that I knew I was missing in the books I was reading, and now I'm going to be looking for it. Like if you have any book recommendations where the politics, where it's still like fantasy or contemporary or something, it's still fiction, like very much fiction, but there are politics in the world, let me know, because I thought this was so fun. I also thought that the writing was pretty good. I've read a lot of really badly written books lately, and just in general, just like in the past, there is so much poor writing out there that it was kind of a breath of fresh air to read these books by Victoria Aveyard and to not have to rewrite every sentence as I went along or get lost all the time because things were not phrased correctly or whatever. I'm not going to get into all of that, but there are so many just very poorly written books out there. It was nice to have something that was actually intelligible and that I didn't feel bogged down on. And that's not to say that Victoria Aveyard's writing is absolutely perfect and that I wouldn't change a thing. It's hard to find perfect writing, and everybody has different tastes, and just because I like a certain type of writing does not necessarily mean that it's better or worse than some other type of writing. This is a whole nother video. There definitely are things that make for good and bad writing. I won't get into those right now, but I have a BFA in creative writing, so I feel like I know what I'm talking about, but I'm not going to get into that right now. The point is, I still enjoyed Victoria Aveyard's writing. Sometimes I felt that she was telling too much and not letting the reader just figure things out, but that was mostly in like the first and second books. I feel like I didn't notice that as much in the last two. And again, I liked the way that she did the characters, and she paid attention to like the trauma that they would have from different things, or like the PTSD that they're dealing with, and that continued to be important. So I thought she did a very good job, and I was pleasantly surprised. What else? Plot. I'm not huge on plot. Usually that's not what matters most to me in a story. If I like the characters and I like the writing, then I don't really care what the plot is usually. But I still think that I can say that this one had a good plot and that it was compelling, and there weren't things in it that just didn't make sense. Like everything made sense and had a purpose and like came back into play. Something that was mentioned way earlier would have a purpose later. So I felt that the plot was done really well. For me, this was a 4-star read, the whole series. And it would be a 5-star, except that I feel like I gave those out a little bit too generously. So I'm kind of waiting for something that just completely blows me away, that I want to share with everybody. And this is a series that I would recommend if you like fantasy, if you like dystopian, if you want to read something that's a mix of both, definitely check it out. It's good YA also. But I don't know that it was for sure a 5-star read. It probably should be. It honestly should be. I just always feel like I give out 5-star reads too easily, but I really enjoyed it. And I feel like that's what matters for the rating. It's my opinion, and I loved it. I had so much fun. I became so obsessed with it. I had to like start looking up the characters on Pinterest and look for fan art. And if this were a TV series, I would watch it. Like I really want somebody who cares about the series to turn it into a TV show and do it justice. But I'm scared that it wouldn't be done justice, so I don't want that to happen. But if somebody would really care about it, I would love to see this on screen. I think this is the last thing before I end the video. I just don't want to forget to do a content guide. For graphic content and gore and violence, that sort of thing, there are definitely times when it's fairly graphic, but those times are few and far between. So kind of a 3. It's moderate for violence and gore. I mean, for violence, it's probably worse. I just don't always feel like violence is that bad, but that sounds terrible. But I mean, it is about like a huge war going on, so there's lots of battles, and we're very much in those battles. So if you don't like fighting or any mention of gore, then don't read the series, but honestly, I think it's more of like a 3. I think I have to put language at a 5. I could possibly drop it down to a 4, but there is quite a bit of swearing. But I'm gonna stick with 5, not for the quantity of swearing, but for the quality, I guess. because it's not like it's chocked full of swear words all the time. It's not like there's tons of profanity. But when there is profanity, it's pretty up there. So I guess I'd have to give it a 5 for language too, even though that kind of hurts because if we compare it to something like The Hate U Give, it's nothing. It's nothing at all compared to The Hate U Give. But I just want to be completely honest about this. If anybody is like really sensitive to profanity in their books, they're swearing in this one. And then for mature content, I give it like a 2. It's really not that bad. Like, this is some of the best YA I've read just because it's not full of graphic content and mature content all the time. There are some like kisses and such, but nothing goes too far. So yeah, I'd give it more like a 2, maybe a 3 sometimes. Maybe it's a little bit more like moderate, but I don't really think so. It's not that bad. So I think I'd give it a 2. I think I'd stick with a 2. And I'm now realizing I didn't ever give y'all a synopsis either, so let me do that before I end this video. I don't really know how to give a synopsis because there's so much that happens, but here's a brief overview, I guess. In this world, there are people with silver blood and people with red blood, and the people with silver blood have powers, and the people with red blood do not. So in especially the kingdom that we start out in Norda, the silvers are elevated to basically royalty, and then the reds are their servants or their slaves. And they're very much looked down on and have very few rights, and they get like drafted into the war that's going on because they can't do anything about it. So you have this drastic divide in the society until this red-blooded girl tips the scales. And it's found out that she has powers that she didn't even know she had. And so now the silvers have to kind of hide her, and in Red Queen, they hide her in plain sight by saying, oh, she's this long-lost silver princess or silver nobility, whatever. Maybe not a princess, but she's long-lost silver, and they make up this whole story and whatever, and they kind of hide her in plain sight because they can't let anybody know that the Reds have powers like they do, because what's that going to do to their society? So that's the catalyst for the whole thing. So then we follow Mare and a bunch of other characters on this journey as the kingdom gets thrown into upheaval, and there are other kingdoms and wars looming on the horizon, and it just becomes this whole big world with like this like secret society, and it's so cool. It's so cool. I'm trying not to give away anything, but also give you kind of an idea, but basically they're trying to change the world so that the Reds are not looked down on anymore, and so much happens in between all of that. But that's about the best synopsis I can give. I am so bad at these. And for a series, it's so much harder too, because there's so much that happens in every single book, and every single book ends with this big cliffhanger twist that you didn't see coming, and so you have to jump into the other one, and then that one's totally different. But the main thing is silvers, reds, silvers are way above the reds don't want to stand for that anymore. There you go. And that is officially going to be it for this video. So if you liked it, please give it a like and subscribe down below. And let me know what you're currently reading. And let me know, are you interested in reading Red Queen? Does this seem like something you'd like? If not, what's your preferred genre? And definitely let me know if you've read any other dystopian fantasy, because I am very much interested in this genre now. So if you have any recommendations, let me know down below. And that's it for this video. So thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye!